Pursuit of happiness, you know the thing, as Joe likes to say. We also know we're one nation under God. There are a lot of folks trying to divide us right now, but we know who we are. We love God, our families, and our republic. Your support of veteran-owned, American-made, anti-woke companies like Palmetto State Armory, Caliber Coffee, Right to Bear Self-Defense, and AAC Ammunition keeps us strong at home. We vote with our feet and our dollars to stay free. To that end, AAC just rolled out a new line of AK-47.
Yep, ladies and gentlemen, that is the nominee to be Secretary of Defense of the United States of America, the largest cabinet office of the United States government, the largest department of the United States government, the largest and most powerful military in the world. That's the guy they've nominated to be our Secretary of Defense in the heels of Donald Rumsfeld's and Secretary Ashton and Austin, or Ash Carter, Austin. I mean, you know the names: Jim Mattis, 4-star general. That himself is Pete Hegseth. We're going live suddenly. Welcome. Good to see you guys. I am Fred Wellman, host of Online with Vote Vets, right here on all the Vote Vets channels. It's so great to be here with you. We just decided to have a conversation with this. We were all joking among the Vote Vet staff. We don't know how the news channels do it, making clips and a show in like a minute, but here we are. We do it easy. Me and JJ are with you today. Hey, look, we just wanted to kind of quickly get up with you, talk about, just sort of a hot wash, if you will, call it the military, of what we just saw in some 4.5 hours of a hearing with Pete Hegseth. Our first takes, what I can tell you what I heard and what I didn't hear. Okay, a little bit. We got some clips of some of the Pete's. If you weren't able to follow, we grabbed clips offline. In the end, that should be a good conversation. The whole thing, today's nomination hearing, confirmation hearing, was the very first of the Trump administration. There are many nominees. Hegseth is one of the most controversial ones in that group. A lot of folks had really thought the Hegseth nomination might go the way of the Gates nomination, that even this hearing today may not occur. So much has come out about Hegseth's past, a number of articles about his improprieties, both drinking, sexual assault, multiple affairs, children with multiple women, a whole lot of things, on top of his mismanagement of the agencies he did run, the 2 nonprofits he ran, the fact that he's wholly unqualified, as the largest organization he ever ran was maybe 100 folks at the Concerned Veterans of America. He himself admitted that in the hearing today. It was a lot of weird stuff. In the end, the setup of the whole thing was done by the new chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, who announced before the hearing even started, there would only be a single round of questioning with 7 minutes per senator, which is unheard of in these kind of things. You talk about, again, I remind you of the nominee for the largest federal agency, a $850 billion plus budget, 3 million men and women, civilian and military members, and they only want to have 7 minutes per person to ask him questions. That is unheard of. They tried to spin it during the hearing that it wasn't unheard of. It is unheard of. So nonetheless, that's what he went with. He refused to change that, even as multiple senators on the Democratic side asked him to change it. Wicker opened with accusations that he kind of opened setting up the whole front. You could tell that Senator Wicker's job was to be a cheerleader for Hegseth from the very beginning. I won't run his clips because I don't want to see him again. But he did say one of the most interesting things he opened with was how there are so many attacks on Pete Hegseth from anonymous sources. While on the other hand, he had multiple letters he would enter into the record that were people putting their name on the record to do that. Those people put their names in these letters, risking the public attacks because of it. Because as you guys know, people are really, talking good about MAGA really opens you up to being canceled, unlike the death threats you get if you speak ill of MAGA. As it is, the woman who was allegedly signed an NDA over an alleged sexual assault, which we'll talk more about later, has lived in fear of her name being exposed because she will actually be attacked and doxxed. So it's kind of silly from the very beginning. There was questions early on about the FBI investigation. Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island is now the minority leader of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Jack Reed mentioned that only he and the chairman had seen the FBI report and that it was woefully inadequate. We found out before the hearing even started that none of his ex-wives were interviewed by the FBI. The women's that he had affairs on with the next wife were not interviewed by the FBI. Seems pretty standard doing a background check on someone. God knows they interviewed a lot of people in my background when I got my security clearance. But nonetheless, apparently for being Secretary of Defense, we don't interview people who you used to be married to and had affairs on. It was a very uncomfortable at times. I mean, uncomfortable. And I say uncomfortable, I use that word very specifically because it was uncomfortable because both the Democrats asked hard questions. And then you had like Mark Wayne Mullins and others, I think Tim Sheehy, almost uncomfortably, uncomfortably loving on Hegseth, almost to the point where I thought they should get a room. Kramer, I think it was Kramer from North Dakota, and then of course the senator from Alaska. It was super awkward watching them, to be honest with you. But the hardest questions, of course, came from our Democratic colleagues. Democrats in the committee clearly focused on each of their own personal area concerns. For example, many of our women senators and obviously some of the most powerful voices for our service members, our female service members are on that committee, Jill LeBrand, Senator Warren, and others. They focused heavily on his things he said about women in service. And then the others did talk about his qualifications for even serving and other things. So let's kind of start off. Jack Reed, again, as I mentioned, from Rhode Island. I was fortunate to meet him way back in the day in Iraq in 2008 when he was still a senator. He opened up just kind of laying out clearly where he feels about Hegseth's actual qualifications for the job. He didn't hold back at all.
Mr. Hegseth, I do not believe that you are qualified to meet the overwhelming demands of this job. We must acknowledge the concerning public reports against you. A variety of sources, including your own writings, implicate you with disregarding the laws of war, financial mismanagement, racist and sexist remarks about men and women in uniform, alcohol abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and other troubling issues. I have reviewed many of these allegations and find them extremely alarming. Indeed, the totality of your own writings and alleged conduct would disqualify any service member from holding any leadership position in the military, much less being confirmed as the Secretary of Defense.
As you can see, Senator Reed wasn't laid that. He went on for several minutes talking about these things. One of the more interesting points that Senator Reed brought up is a troubling one that many of us who've served previously have been very concerned about. You may have heard that Trump and others in his orbit, especially Hegseth, said they want to create a review board of all senior officers in the United States military to review their warfighting capability and recommend them for continued service. Hegseth himself has said in multiple settings that he thinks we should get rid of, for example, C.Q. Brown, the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Air Force general, who's a black officer, and others. This has been pretty controversial among those of us who have served. The idea that you go through a 30 or 40-year career to make general officer or a flag officer, you get, I mean, that's a lot of promotion boards, folks. Okay. It's only a very tiny number that make it to the very top. And after going all that way, a politicized board of outsiders and retired officers who are clearly MAGA are going to come in and review your warfighting capacity. It's a very troubling development. And as always with the MAGA world, they've taken it and run with it to the point where outside organizations have been making lists of officers they feel should be targeted based on their past. For example, there's a female general officer, a flag officer, who gave a speech at a conference 3 or 4 years ago about DEI initiatives, diversity within our force and how important diversity is. She has been targeted by these outside forces for removal from the military. Jack Reed actually talked about some of these email threats that have come in and asked Hegseth about it directly. It's kind of interesting.
Ms. Hegseth, you've written, and it's quote, "Oh yeah, and fire any general who hasn't carried water for Obama and Biden's extra constitution and agenda-driven transformation for our military. Clean house and start over." It's come to my attention that current serving military personnel have received emails threatening them with being fired for supporting the current DOD policies. One mail that was sent to a military officer with the subject line, clean house, reminiscent of your specific comment, states, and I quote, with the incoming administration looking to remove disloyal, corrupt, rigorous liberal officers such as yourself, we will certainly be putting your name into the list of those personnel to be removed. We know you support the woke DEI policies and will ensure you never again influence anyone in the future. You and the redacted spouse's name will be lucky if you're able to collect your military requirement, end quote. Now, I want to remind everyone that these policies that are being referred to date back decades, to the 1940s and 50s, with respect to racial discrimination particularly, and administrations of both parties, including the Trump administration and their first party, caused those policies to be enforced. Mr. Hegseth, are you aware of these emails being sent to officers?
Senator, you mentioned the word accountability, which is something we have not had for the last 4 years.
Are you aware of these messages being sent to officers?
Certainly, I'm not aware of that. It's not one of my efforts, but there's been no.
Get used to seeing that face in these clips, the Hegseth face. Okay, if it's not the scrunching of his face and denying things that we know he knows about, if the other one is his constant smirk, almost at the end of every line of questioning from a Democrat, he got a cute little smirk on his face, knowing that he wasn't going to really be challenged by anyone. And it was just really ridiculous. So those are his two main faces. Now let's continue that line of qualifications before we get to the other accusations. One of the biggest issues many of us have had with Pete Hegseth as the nominee is that in the long history of secretaries of defense, he is clearly, as far as personal experience, life experience, professional experience, unqualified for the job. He has never served at a high rank. A number of the senators asked him, have you ever negotiated a trade deal? Have you ever actually done an audit of an organization? Have you ever managed the finances of an organization effectively? Because they even had the tax records from his two organizations that showed that he had not managed the finances effectively. No matter how much he denies it, the records show the proof that they are always in the red and the negative as far as their donations go. So what I wanted to show this one clip because actually we love Senator Tammy Duckworth. She's an Army veteran, former Black Hawk pilot like me. Well, that's a 58, but former pilot like myself who was shot down, lost her legs. Senator Duckworth, it may feel like a trick question, but here's the question that she asked, sort of getting at his qualifications to lead the largest military in the world.
A little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations, and how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact amount of nations in that, but I know we have allies in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, trying to work on submarines with them.
Mr. Hegseth, none of those countries are in ASEAN.
Across.
None of those three countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, Mr. Hegseth, this is...
It's that sigh that got me. I left it in the clip on purpose, the sigh. ASEAN is our largest Asian Pacific alliance and treaty organization. He doesn't know what they are, right? He doesn't know what they do. I mean, these are the minimal things. I mean, the thing about this hearing that I told you I'd talk about things we didn't hear. We didn't hear a lot. We didn't hear about our NATO partners. We didn't hear about our international policy. The Secretary of Defense is one of the key members of our foreign policy establishment. He is a negotiator. He does fly to other countries. He does talk to international leaders, presidents of other countries, their ministers of defense. He has to be up to the skills to understand what he's getting into. Hegseth demonstrated clearly today, he has no idea what he's talking about. He has no idea about the alliances that we have and no idea how important they are. The idea of him negotiating those with other countries is patently ridiculous. And look, he's young, okay, compared to every air secretary of defense on the planet of the earth we've ever had in the years of this country since we created the Department of Defense. But she shows just how little he knows and how little qualified he is. You know, she actually had to show his little punchline she got into. Again, her frustration with his lack of qualification. In an earlier questioning with another senator, they talked about how he shouldn't even be Like, he wouldn't be hired to be a CEO of any company, by the way. And as they left that line of questioning when the senator's time ran out, he had a little cute little line to kiss Donald Trump's butt where he said, well, I'm being hired by one of the greatest CEOs in American history. And of course, Tammy Duckworth couldn't let that go either.
They cannot be led by someone who's not competent to do the job. How can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman. Let me make it clear.
Yeah, not quite the great CEO that everyone wants to believe. We all know that. He's only a great CEO because he played one on TV, and that's not even a joke, by the way. That's what even the people who put on that ridiculous Apprentice show will admit that it was all just for show. Okay, so Tamara Duckworth did her part to kind of come after him. One of the really interesting points, one of the biggest conversation points that was had during the hearing is that he has been very loud for a very long time about his position on women serving in the military. Now, look, they're trying to spin it now that, oh, he means specifically certain jobs, or he means specifically as long as they meet certain standards. And there's a lot of lies going on about that. And both Senator Gillibrand and Senator Warren hit him on that, as well as Slotkin. But Senator Warren came in, and basically what she did was, I think she was well prepared in the sense that he kept spinning. Any story that was written that had anonymous sources was, of course, the leftist media attacking. That was an ongoing theme throughout this whole thing. Oh, the leftist media, anonymous smears, okay? But again, so what she did instead was, here are the exact words that you have written in your books or said on TV or on podcasts. And Senator Warren came, as she always does, with the receipts, and he didn't have a lot of good answers. Let's watch this.
Senator, again, I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013, because for me, this issue has always been about standards. And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than standards, lethality, and meritocracy have driven decision-making.
I'm quoting you from the podcast. Women shouldn't be in combat at all. Where is the reference to standards that they should be there if they can carry, if they can run? I don't see that at all, Mr. Hegseth. What I see is there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know, what changed in the 32 days that the song you sang is not the song you come in here today to sing?
Senator, the concerns I have, and the concerns that many have had, especially in ground combat units, is that in pursuit of certain percentages or quotas, standards have been changed. And that makes the combat more difficult
let me make a
for everybody
suggestion
involved.
about what happened in that 32 days. You got a nomination from President Trump. Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion. And I hope you understand that many women serving in the military right now might think that if you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days, that 32 days after you get confirmed, maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat.
There it is, right there. Exactly. I mean, how are we supposed to believe anything he says? He lied in his opening statement. I mean, he lies about a lot of things. I mean, one of the ones that got a lot of us angry, and I won't bring up again, I don't want to see too much of his face, but one of the things he said in his opening statement, he will be the first Secretary of Defense who truly got dirt on his boots and was in the shit. I'm sorry, folks. Those are just flat out lies. There are several combat veteran Secretary of Defense, starting with Chuck Hagel, who served under Obama, who was actually Republican when he served under Obama, who's a highly decorated Vietnam veteran, an infantryman. He was the very first enlisted man to serve as the Secretary of Defense, okay? Not to mention Lloyd Austin, an Army 4-star general who earned his combat action, or his CIB, his combat entry badge, during Operation Desert Storm, which, if I recall, since I was in it, had a lot of dirt on boots. And of course, James Mattis, who spent 40 years in the military and saw combat also in Desert Storm and elsewhere. So the idea that this guy will be the first guy who did one single tour of combat, or two tours of combat, is somehow more qualified as because of his combat experience than these highly esteemed men who went before him is just repulsive and a lie. But on top of that, he said something. Did you hear what he said about quotas? Now, that's a constant theme we hear from the folks in the Republican side, and it's a lie. There's no quotas, okay? There's never been a quota. DEI is not a quota system, okay? Diversity programs are not quota. No one's ever quota, okay? I served for 22 years, and that kind of made me angry, and I know it made it made a number of folks mad. I think Senator Gillibrand brought that up when he tried to use that on her about quotas. Let's watch that.
Standards have been changed inside infantry training units, ranger school, infantry battalions to ensure that
Give me one example. Please give me an example. I get you're making these generalized
meet
statements.
quotas to have a certain number of female infantry officers or infantry enlisted, and that disparages those women
Commanders
who are
do
incredibly
not have to
capable
meet
of meeting
quotas
that
for the
standard.
infantry. Commanders do not have to have a quota for women in the infantry. That does not exist. It does not exist. And your statements are creating the impression that these exist, because they do not. There are not quotas. We want the most lethal force. But I'm telling you, having been here for 15 years, listening to testimony about men and women in combat and the type of operations that were successful in Afghanistan and in Iraq, women were essential for many of those units. When Ranger units
I'll finish that thought. What she's talking about is that women in combat were essential. We learned this during Iraq, especially, and Afghanistan, where because of the nature of their culture, women are often separated from the men, and you get more information from women if you had another woman with you who could go in there and have conversations with them. In addition, they have a different sense for things that are going on. We saw this often, even in my aviation unit, where I served in the initial invasion of Iraq, where I was the operations officer for a Black Hawk battalion. I spent most of my time on the ground, driving around Iraq, doing civil affairs and all. Having women soldiers with us was key to our operational success because their ability to see things that we didn't see in ways we didn't see. The cultural diversity of a force is important. And I say that on purpose. It's not about the color of your skin. It's about the experience you bring to it because of your diversity. Women see things differently than men, thank God. And they see things that we didn't see as trained. And that's what she's talking about. There are no quotas. To say there's a quota is an absolute lie. And to say the standards have been lowered is also an absolute lie, which is why it's been so hard for many years for women to make it in the Ranger School pass. It's why it's hard for them. They actually created individual standards for each MOS, every occupational specialty in the military. So it's not good enough to do the basic Army physical fitness test of 2 miles. One of the Republican senators, I think it was Cotton, talking about, yeah, you can do 22 minutes to pass the 2 mile fitness test. That's true. That is absolutely true for female standards. Unfortunately, what is also true is that women who go in the infantry have specific standards for that very thing they go into, okay? They go into that very clearly, that there are specific job requirements. For example, if you're going to be a woman in a tank, you have to be able to lift a 50-pound shell, a tank shell. What's the point of going in? And that's not the normal PT test. Same thing with women in the artillery. They have to be able to handle 100-pound shells. It's a big deal to have those. So there are, in fact, very different physical standards for women in those jobs. So all these are based on lies, but that didn't stop him from doing it. It certainly didn't stop his Republican colleagues from backing them up. But again, I don't want to hear from them. Now, Alyssa Slotkin, who of course is brand new senator, she's a former CIA agent. Her focus, instead of on the women in service one, was really a lot about illegal orders. If you guys remember, during the BLM protests in Washington, D.C., Trump asked Esper, then Secretary of Defense Esper, a West Point graduate, by the way, to bring troops, the 82nd Airborne, into D.C. to use them to put down the riots. Our 82nd Airborne troops are not trained for that. There was an incident where a medevac helicopter was used to what we call dust off some of the protesters, which is an illegal act. It's an illegal violation of our flight rules, but is considered an illegal act under the military code. He was asked specifically by Lisa Slotkin, if one of the things that Esper said in his book he wrote after leaving the administration, that he talked Trump out of essentially violating the law by using combat troops in that way against American citizens. She asked a simple question: Would you refused to follow an illegal order, and how would you handle that? And here's how that went.
Agree that there are some orders that can be given by the commander-in-chief that would violate the U.S. Constitution.
Senator, thank you for your service. But I reject the premise that President Trump is going to be giving illegal orders.
No, I'm not saying he will, but do you believe there is such a thing as an illegal order that Joe Biden or any other president, Donald Trump, could give? Is there anything that a commander-in-chief could ask you to do with the uniformed military that would be in violation of the U.S. Constitution?
Senator, anybody of any party
Right.
could give an order that is against the Constitution or against the law.
Right. Okay. So are you saying that you would stand in the breach and push back if you were given an illegal order?
I start by saying I reject the premise that President
I
Trump will
understand.
be giving
You've done your
any
genuflecting
illegal
to him,
orders
but
at all.
This isn't a hypothetical, okay? Your predecessor in a Trump administration, Secretary Esper, was asked and did use uniformed military to clear unarmed protesters.
Again, he avoids the question. And you saw that a lot during it. If you watched, if you suffered through it, as I did, just for you, he would just not answer the question. When he was you'll see it again in an upcoming clip. I'm looking at your comments. And by the way, thanks for joining us. I'll take a pause here to thank everyone who's jumped on this. I know we just showed up on your computers, and I appreciate that. So many of our usual suspects are here. It's good to see you all here with Vote Vets. One of the questions, what is his military experience? I should have set that up. Pete Hegseth did serve all the way to, he was promoted to major, which is a field grade rank. It's unusual for someone to leave the military as a major. Generally, when you make major, you're just about that 20-year mark you'll stay. Now, he was National Guard, so it's a little bit of a different layout, and often you do retire. His combat experience, he went to Princeton, did ROTC with Princeton. I can even look real quick while we're talking about it. Did ROTC at Princeton. When he came out, he served, he's an infantry officer. He went with the Minnesota National Guard, and he served in Guantanamo Bay on the operational control of the 101st, where he spent time with sort of as a guard at Gitmo in 2004. He actually deployed to Iraq, Baghdad, Samarra area with the 101st Airborne again as a platoon leader in 2005, 2006. I think that's the extent of his combat experience. Oh, he did go to Afghanistan in 2012 as a captain. He volunteered to deploy with the Minnesota Army National Guard and serve the Afghan security forces. So he does have 2 combat tours as a lieutenant and a captain. That's his combat experience. But back to the topic at hand. You can see he kind of refused to answer that question. And it shouldn't be a hard question to answer. Again, as mentioned, his military career. We are trained and taught, to learn. As he mentioned once, he actually mentioned his military science class in ROTC of how to avoid complying with illegal orders, how to recognize an illegal order, how you handle that when that's handed, the way you tell your boss, no, sir, that's an illegal order. I cannot follow that order. There's ways to handle that. And the fact that the guy who wants to be the highest ranking person in the military, he is in the chain of command, the Secretary of Defense, refuses to answer whether or not there would be an illegal order and how he'd handle it is extremely troubling. Needless to say. But it went on from there. Senator Blumenthal got his chance. He asked a lot about the financial mismanagement, the 2 organizations that Hegseth ran. For those who aren't familiar, there was several stories that came out saying that while Pete ran, he ran 2 nonprofit organizations that were conservative focused. The first one was called Vets for Freedom, which in many ways was an opponent of ours, if you will, if you want to call it an opponent, in the sense that while we were calling for more rational actors in our global wars, Vets for Freedom was very focused on supporting the surge in Iraq, supporting the surge in Afghanistan, putting more troops in combat, etc. He ran that for several years. The story goes that because of his financial and personal mismanagement, the organization actually ran out of money and was folded into another, that an audit after he left showed that his mismanagement had led to it. The next organization worked with called Concerned Veterans of America, which falls under the Koch brothers umbrella. CVA was very much focused on a lot of us would call it privatization of the VA. Their stated goal was to give veterans more options for healthcare. They were very big on what we called health choice, allowing veterans to use more private doctors, etc. He ran CVA for several years and again was pushed out of that one under accusations of both financial mismanagement as well as professional impropriety. There was a story written in the news about how while at an event at a hotel bar, he and another veteran started chanting "Kill all Muslims" when he was drunk. There was reports of him taking his staff to a strip bar and trying to get up on stage with the strippers. There was a number of stories of his inappropriate drinking where he had to be carried out of events. All of these were mentioned, and we'll hear more about those from Senator Kane. But before that, Senator Blumenthal asked about the financial mismanagement, and will he be willing to go let the FBI go deeper into that? And here's what he said about the FBI investigating him further than already has.
That we are entitled to the facts here. I've asked for more documents. I assume you'd be willing to submit to an expanded FBI background check that interviews your colleagues, accountants, ex-wives, former spouses, sexual assault survivors, and others, and enable them to come forward.
Senator, I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
But you would submit to it and support it.
I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. I at this
Drink. You know, he drank a lot of water. I bet he had to pee after 4 hours. I do this show for half an hour. I got to pee. He drank a lot of water in 4 hours because every time he got nervous, he had a drink. And I got to tell you, yeah, the idea that, well, I'm not in charge of FBI background checks. The question was, would you support it? But once again, he did not answer it. So obfuscating is the name of the game, not to use a fancy word because even I know what it means. Now, the most aggressive questioning, some of the most questioned of the day between Elizabeth Warren and others was Senator Tim Kane, my old senator from Virginia, who's a very nice man, you know, kind of a Midwest, you know, Southern dad kind of guy. He was not having it today. Kane, I remember tweeting, boy, Tim Kane from the top of the ropes. He came out fighting, and this is worth a watch. Tim Kane talking very directly to Pete Hegseth today.
Led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
your attorney
those
used
false
the
claims,
phrase,
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us. And I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before an open book, one who's watched this.
With multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us.
Yeah, open book. Won't reveal if he'll take the NDA off the woman. So the resolution, supposed the incident that occurred with a Republican woman at a conference, she accused him of rape. Okay, there was police investigation that she was raped. She believes she may have been drugged and that he took advantage of her. The entire thing was settled, which, by the way, his lawyer has confirmed publicly that the thing was resolved with a non-disclosure agreement and a settlement agreement. His lawyer himself has said publicly he did this because he was worried he would hurt his job at Fox News. This is all publicly confirmed. These aren't accusations. His lawyer confirmed there was a settlement. His lawyer confirmed there is non-disclosure. His lawyer confirmed the reasoning was it would hurt his job at Fox News. So it's really not an open book when you won't actually release anyone. And of course, we did find out, Jane Mayer from, I believe, a patent article, as she always does, remarkable reporter. She had an article out yesterday saying that shockingly, and we're hoping to confirm this, supposedly that accuser did offer to meet with Senator Joanie Ernst of the Republicans, and she refused. And we'll have more about that later. So let's some other stuff that happened at this hearing without clips. I mean, one of the things that shocked me and bothered me was that he said at least twice to 3 times that is their intent to reinstate and give the rank back and apologize to all the service members who were kicked out of the military because of refusing the COVID vaccine. He insisted multiple times it was an experimental vaccine and that 8,000 service members were kicked out wrongly. A number of the Republican senators piled onto that one. Yeah, they refused a lawful order. It is a lawful order to get a vaccine. Millions and millions of service members got them. A few thousand, somewhere around 8,000, said, heck no, they lost their jobs. And of course, they're now the martyrs and the victims. He said they will reinstate those who refused a lawful military order, refused an order to do a simple thing, get a shot for the good order, discipline, and safety of the force. But they didn't do it. He's going to reinstate them. There was, for me, and I don't know how you guys felt, it's a touchy topic. There was an uncomfortable amount of discussions of his Christian faith. There's two things you don't normally see in a Secretary of Defense hearing or conversation. The thing about that we've always loved, and I've been doing, I was a service member for 20 years. I was a veterans advocate for a decade. Now I'm a political guy for the last 5 years. The one thing about the Senate Armed Services Committee, the one thing about the coming to Senate, it's a bipartisan, it's usually very low partisanship, and what would be normal is very low in religion and revoking religion. Obviously, we serve the American people, a country based on separation of church and state. Our service members come from every possible background, imagine, from every site of Christian faith to Muslims and Hindus and you name it, and those who have no faith, to Jews. We have a large history. We have a long, long history of opening our ranks and everyone to everyone of every religion and creed. The fact that he invoked his Christianity so very often, and Republican senators invoked his Christianity, one going on and on, the opening part of his questioning about how it gave him faith to see someone embracing his Christian faith so openly and thank the Lord. Of course, the other way they use this in these cases is obviously the Jesus get out of jail card. Every time he was accused of impropriety between his drinking and his affairs and and I didn't show the part of I decided not to show the part where Tim Kaine hit him. The first opening parts of Tim Kaine's, that was actually the light part of Tim Kaine's speaking. Earlier in it, and you should go watch it, Tim Kaine hit him relentlessly about the fact that when he did have, so he has said that an incident in I believe it was Arizona with the woman with the NDA, that occurred, that was consensual. In his telling, it's a consensual sexual affair. That was 2 months after his second wife gave birth. So he's admitting that he had an adulterous affair while still married to his second wife with another woman. That's illegal under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Say that's what Kane was getting at. Everyone knows that in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, adulterous affairs are against the actual regulations. Many senior officers have lost their jobs for it. One of my own general officers, when I was this is years ago, he was the division commander, the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii. He was busted after retirement. Before he could retire from the military, he was busted from 2-star general to colonel, 2 full ranks, for having numerous affairs with even his aide's wife, if you can believe such a thing. What kind of man would do that? And because no man should do that, he was both reduced a rank to colonel before he retired. That's how serious the military takes these affairs. He admitted that it was an affair. And so again and again, these moral failings were brought up, and he dismissed them as either anonymous accusations or non-important. But again, the key to that whole thing was in the end, he would say, but I've been saved. It was a constant refrain that, and even the Republican senators used, well, yeah, but he's put his faith in Jesus since then. Okay. It's not a wall from your misdeeds. Okay. You can't do that. Okay. We are responsible for our actions. Okay. And just to say, well, to keep saying over and over, invoking his Christian faith as a way to avoid any kind of responsibility for his past acts is disgusting. It would be disgusting in anyone, but someone who wants to lead a multiracial, multi-religious, multi-faith organization with millions of people from every background in the United States, it's disturbing to see someone use their Christian faith as a way to block any kind of criticism for their outrageous actions. Another one I noticed that maybe a lot of veterans, I'd love to see in the comments if any veterans notice this. Did you guys notice, if you're a veteran, him constantly saying war fighters? It's about the war fighters. It's about the war fighters. War fighters. But you didn't hear him say service members, men and women who serve, our men and women in uniform. There's common terms we use when we talk about service members. I say service members instead of soldiers or sailors or Marines or coasties, whatever. We say that a lot We say service members, we say military members, but you'll notice that the term warfighter is very much, and you nailed it. Wait, you did. You nailed it. It's very much a term used a lot by we call them the vet bros, more of the alpha bro veterans, the door kickers, we'll call them, the sheepdogs, the tough guy. You see these guys a lot. They're the ones wearing the t-shirts and selling coffee, which, as Pete did at the very beginning of the show, we showed him selling ammunition from a company that makes ammunition. That's a very big term to use. But let's talk about what that means. What they're saying is there's war fighters and then there's everybody else. Okay. And you and I know, if you know anything with the military, the number of actual we call them door kickers, or the pointy end of the spear, if you will, is very, very small compared to the size of the United States military. Because for you to put that pointy end of the spear against an enemy, there's a very long shaft that gets you there. And that's the logisticians, that's the pilots, that's the admins who make sure you get paid, that's the staffs that make sure you actually end up in the right freaking place. And so this constant refrain of the warfighter, and the warfighter was very interesting to me. Okay, it tells you a lot, and it's almost he's saying it very subtly that the only people I'm going to care about are the ones who are the door kickers, and the rest don't just matter. It's a very subtle little play that he gets that only a lot of us who are on the inside would notice. Another thing he got beat up for quite a bit, as somebody mentioned just now too, and right here, thank you, is the fact that he supported war criminals. That's extremely disturbing. There was an exchange there I didn't show a clip of, where a pretty hard exchange where he talked the fact, I think it was Kane again, as a matter of fact. Tim Kane was on fire today. We should just show all 7 minutes. But if you don't know, one of the things he did during the first Trump administration, he supported Eddie Gallagher and a number of other service members who were accused and convicted of war crimes. They weren't just accused, they were convicted. What Hegseth tried to say was that it was Washington, D.C. insiders manipulating the system, and that's not true at all. Eddie Gallagher specifically was turned in by fellow Navy SEALs who were in combat with him in Iraq, where he executed a prisoner, for example, and other things he did, shooting people who were innocent civilians. Eddie Gallagher was brought to trial by his command. He was convicted of his crimes and then enrolled Pete Hegseth and some other groups and got Trump to pardon them. The idea that the guy is going to be charged in the Uniform Code of Military Justice was very troubling to a number of the senators today. One thing he did mention also, I did notice. Did you guys notice he never once talked about family policies? I know that sounds stupid or strange, but the thing is, the Secretary of Defense is not a war fighter, okay? I mean, he even talked about doing PT with the troops. I don't give a shit if you do PT with the troop. I'm sorry. I could not give a flip. I'm positive that none of my soldiers in 22 years in the freaking Army gave a flying crap if the Secretary of Defense himself could do push-ups and run with us. They don't care. It's not his damn job. His job is to make sure the guys who do run have the right shoes. Okay? His job is to make sure the guys who do run have the funding at their base so the roads are safe. That sounds stupid, but his job is also to make sure that my family members who are also in the military with me have health care. That family members who are based in places like Missouri, where abortion's been outlawed and is now, because of that, lost OBGYNs and birthing centers to the tune of dozens, that those family members have health care available to them. Where he specifically said in one comment, he's against the idea of paying for travel, because current DoD policy allows those service members and their family members who do need abortion care or pregnancy care to be able to travel to get that in another state where if they're stationed in a state that doesn't allow it. You see, the second order effect of all these abortion bans is we're losing the OBGYNs, and past Pentagon policy has closed many of our military hospitals. There wasn't a single word about families. Not a word. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys can say in the comments. I never heard a single time of our military families being mentioned once. And not another mention of all the millions of civilians that keep that Pentagon going. Because believe me, there's only about 1.5 million actual service members in uniform. The rest of the Pentagon, the largest government agency, is civilians who make it all work. The people with the depth of knowledge, the people who do the research, the people who run the back end of everything we do, the people who make sure that we can contract for planes. I assure you, a 20-year military officer has no idea how to set up a huge airlift going of civilian planes to Iraq, but civilians who've been there for 20 years do. Those are an integral part of the military. Heard no mention of them. So it's troubling to me that in the end, in my opinion, 4.5 hours is way too short. Way too short. Okay, because all we talked about was warfighter. Honestly, it really felt like he was applying to be promoted to general. It never once felt to me like he's applying for the job of SecDef. It felt like he was applying for the job of 4-star general, and he's not. He's not qualified for that either, by the way. That takes 40 years of service. In the end, it's the wrong guy for the wrong job. And of course, our Republican senators just don't get that. They just think it's out of the box thinking, or the excuse constantly heard was, well, Trump nominated him. I mean, that never stopped him in the past. But again, key parts of what should have been discussed: international policy, weapons policy, family policy, civilian labor policy. None of that got discussed in a very short time. That was only 4 hours straight. One question, 7 minutes per senator. It's sort of really, really disgusting to be had. You know, it was just like, and then, okay, let's talk about his prospects now. Well, honestly, it looks like every Republican on the committee is all good, except maybe Joanie Ernst. Joanie Ernst has expressed some reservations a little bit. We've heard, you know, in her version of it, who knows what that means, but she did ask one question, and it's kind of interesting to watch her questioning. Let's watch this last clip we have of Joanie Ernst talking to Hegseth about her focus on sexual assaults in the military. Keep in mind that Joanie Ernst is a former military officer and has said she was assaulted sexually while serving. Got that video, JJ? Did I surprise you?
A priority of mine has been combating sexual assault in the military and making sure that all of our service members are treated with dignity and respect. This has been so important. Senator Gillibrand and I have worked on this, and we were able to get changes made to the Uniform Code of Military Justice to make sure that we have improvements and on how we address the tragic and life-altering issues of rape, sexual assault. It will demand time and attention from the Pentagon under your watch if you are confirmed. So as Secretary of Defense, will you appoint a senior level official dedicated to sexual assault prevention and response?
Senator, as we have discussed, yes, I will.
Okay, and my time has expired.
That wasn't like the other senators. If you watch the whole thing, she was much more serious in her questioning of him. She was much more focused in her questioning of him. She did not take questions when she walked out. I know what that means. Obviously, he'll probably pass the committee. That seems almost a foregone conclusion at this point. He can only afford to lose, I believe, 3 to 4 senators, and then he won't get, if all the Democrats stick together, which is in doubt, by the way, which I won't get into. There's been some questions around Senator Fetterman, possibly, but it is in doubt. The fact is, today's hearing should just erase any doubt. Pete Hegseth is wholly unqualified. And by setting it, we could set aside the stories about his management organization, set aside the stories about sexual propriety and drinking. Let's just simply focus on his qualifications. The largest organization he led in the military was a platoon, 30-man platoon. When I ran that when I was lieutenant, just like he did. His NOPROS, well, he claimed hundreds and 200s, were never that big. They had a lot of volunteers, but they're relatively small organizations. In his life, he's never run a company. He's never run, I mean, when I mean company, I mean like a civilian company. He has been a personality on TV for the last 10 years. He is wholly unqualified compared to anyone who's ever served in that position to be the Secretary of Defense. So what remains is seen. What happens next? I'll let you go. Senator Wicker came out, was glowing about how great he did and how an amazing hearing it was, which is weird because we all watched it and that's not what we saw at all, but, you know, Republican. He said he actually, during the hearing, he said that because a number of the questions got cut off, the Democrats have asked to ask more questions. They can enter those in the record. If history's any guide, Hegseth doesn't have to answer any of them, and there's a better than even chance he won't. But they're going to leave the record open for 2 to 3 days. Wicker would not commit to a date to vote on his nomination, so we will remain to see when that vote will be. And of course, they can't vote him for the whole Senate until President Trump is the actual president, January 20th, next week, a week from today. So there's a lot going on. A lot of stuff going on. That's the Hegseth briefing from our perspective, what we heard, what we didn't hear. I'm sure I missed a few things. Feel free to comment, tell your friends about it. I'm happy to hear your thoughts. As you can see, it was it was painful to watch. I'm not going to name any names. I had a really good, I had a good friend who was going to join us, but she was just like, "No, man, I can't." No. And I agree with her wholly. It was hard to watch. And what bothers me is how many of my female and women veteran friends are troubled by it. And that's the one thing I will say as my final comment. He is accused of sexual impropriety. He is credibly accused of sexual assault even. And the idea of all the work that people like Gillibrand and Joanie Ernst and others have done, and all of our women veterans, including women veterans right here with the Vote Vets, have worked so hard to get to beat back a rash of sexual assault allegations and continuing problems within the military with those issues. To have someone to actually be in charge of the entire Defense Department with the history and the accusations against him, it should have been disqualifying. I'm old enough to remember people getting disqualified for jobs for having affairs. I'm old to remember the hint of an affair killing presidential candidates. But here they want to actually put a guy in charge of the United States military, an organization with a reputation for its morals and to be intact, a guy of such little moral character as Pete Hegseth. So it's troubling, but here we are. I mean, I think you couldn't have had a more appropriate start to the Trump administration process than the Hegseth nomination. Now, finally, today was also supposed to be Doug Collins' confirmation hearing with the Veterans Affairs Committee. That was postponed to a week from now. The reasoning was that the background checks hadn't come in. The committee announced that it wasn't because of Doug Collins doing anything. However, the background check wasn't complete as it needs to be. They still need information from him. So you'll see Veterans Affairs will be next week. We'll watch it the same way. I imagine we'll have some of the same things to say. As you know, the Trump administration has a lot of plans for day one. They have been very clear between the Project 2025 and the stuff they're going to take with them that on day one, this administration has a lot of plans to do some really terrible things. We'll be parsing through those as things that affect veterans, our military families, and our national security. And we'll be bringing those to you as well, probably in a similar manner. We're just going to pop on. So why do I need you to do this? This is the most important thing of the whole show, you guys. I need you to go to our YouTube channel. I need you to subscribe. I need you to hit the little bell, the notifications bell, so you know the next time I just show up on your screen with great guests and things to talk about, you'll get notified from YouTube and you'll get a message saying, hey, Vote Vets is going live. You should join them. We would love to have you join us more. Again, so subscribe and then hit notifications on our channel so you can join us. Tell your friends. You don't have to be a veteran. Look, the one thing we talk about a lot is Vote Vets is for everybody. We wouldn't be able to do this work without the support of civilians and advocates and experts, and of course, our nation's veterans and service members and their families. There's two things I want to tell you about before we go. VoteVets.org is our website. There's two buttons on there I'd love you to look at. One is the donate button because we are a nonprofit. We are an organization that thrives on your support and the support of our members. So the donate button on our website. And the second one is the take action button. And the take action button is a good one if you want to actually help us do our work. Because, you know, I've done it myself. I've told the story before. I came into D.C. for we did a fly-in of veterans to talk about Ukraine with our elected officials. I imagine we'll be doing a lot of those in the next 4 years. You can be a part of all that, be a civilian or a military member. Hit the take action button. That allows you to sign up for our notices and opportunities. We reach out all the time looking for folks to join us for the show or maybe do a video about your experience. All those things. There's two places right there. Take action and donate. Help us do the work we do. Help us support our nation's veterans, our military, and our national security. In the end, I am Fred Wellman. I am a retired United States Army officer, and it's so glad to be with you today. Thank you for joining us. 4,000 of you. It was pretty cool. Thank you with no notice. That's so awesome. We are Vote Vets. This is online Vote Vets, and we'll be seeing you more, obviously, in the coming days. In the meantime, jump in the action, folks. Our democracy is in our hands, and we're here to fight with you. Thanks.